Welcome to the Interreg Italia Malta I Know seminars. This one is number 5.6 and it relates to the 25 questions that every business plan should answer. Now this is not simply something we've made up on the spot. This has been evolving over the last 20 years and the data come from over 5,000 businesses that we've worked with from over 32 countries. In particular, we've distilled down key questions that financiers will want to know the answer to. Now they can be bank managers, grant funders, and very commonly for high-tech, high-growth companies, business angels looking to make an investment in the business. You'll see that we're in track 5 of the overall programme, and this relates to business planning and cash flow forecasting. So we would point out that there are 5 key challenge points that you're going to be tested on when your business plan and cash flow forecast are reviewed by a financier. Number 1, the management team. Always the most important point. Number 2, intellectual property. Absolutely critical to demonstrate that you are allowed to sell what you intend to sell, that you own what you're selling, and that you're taking steps to protect it. Number 3, the business opportunity. Very, very important. Good ideas don't necessarily translate into healthy sales. So what is the business opportunity? Fourthly, have you worked out your funding needs and your cash flow forecast? Has that forgotten anything? Is it clear? Is it reasonable and realistic? And fifth, what is the external environment? So we would like just to run through with you 5 very common questions that arise in each of those challenge areas to help you establish a way of dealing with that, and for dealing with that not just in discussion with financiers, but incorporating that information into your business plan. Let's start with number 1 then, management. Here are the key questions that we hear time and again. Number 1, does the management team have the technical knowledge to understand the business plan? Number 2, does it have the experience to carry it out? Number 3, has the current team any functional gaps? That can be okay, so long as there are plans in place to fill those gaps. Number 4, will the management team implement appropriate systems to monitor and control the business? And finally, number 5, can the management team articulate its plan, both in written form and with the spoken word? Intellectual property then, number 2, has at its heart, does the business own or have the right, for example a license, to sell its proposed products and services? Number 2, have appropriate steps been taken to formally protect the intellectual property, perhaps something like a patent or a trademark? Number 3, does the business understand how to protect its know-how, from which all intellectual property is really based? Are appropriate steps in place? Number 4, does the business need key suppliers or partners? Perhaps they themselves have intellectual property that the business must draw upon. If that's the case, working with key partners, or in case of doing your own research and development, is there a prospect of new intellectual property being developed? And if so, how will that be protected? The third area relates to business opportunity. And number 1, we want to know, has the business done appropriate market research to identify its potential customers and their needs? Does the business understand its product or service in terms of benefits rather than features? Has the business identified its competitors and analysed how its products and services compare with theirs? Is the planned route to market appropriate? And then the 5th and last one is the market potential projection realistic, both in terms of size of market and the speed with which you can capture a proportion of that market? Overall, once again, are your projections reasonable and realistic? From all of that, we need to know whether or not you have determined your funding requirements and cash flow accurately for the period of the business plan. So number 1, the first thing is, have you identified all of the costs? And as a consequence, the level of funding that you'll need. How much do you need and how long will you need it for? If you're seeking debt finance, has the business demonstrated that it's able to make repayments from the forecast? If you're seeking investment, does the opportunity meet the needs of investors? High growth, exit strategy, and so on. And then how sensitive is the cash flow to reduced sales? What we mean by this is that if your sales fall by 1%, does that suddenly tip you into the red, into a negative cash flow? Have you got some leeway in there so that you keep your head well above water? Finally, on this section, is there an appropriate shareholder agreement or partnership agreement in place? That's terribly important. Now, we think, as you can see on slide 8, that section 5 about the external environment should be considered with respect to where your business will be operating. That may be local, it may be national, or it may be international. So the first thing of all, have obvious threats been considered? And this really requires a SWOT analysis, looking at internal and strengths and weaknesses, and external opportunities and threats. And in particular, have the threats been identified and steps taken to minimise impact? We then think that the PEST analysis is a good place to start. So number 2, P in PEST stands for political. What might be the impact of any political change? Number 3, what might be the impact of any economic change? Number 4, what might be the impact of any social change? And number 5, what might be the impact of technological change? It is well worth considering your business plan in the context of all of these with respect to the external environment. So in conclusion, these 25 questions are likely to arise in the minds of any financier whenever you seek funding. So make sure your business plan addresses all of these questions adequately. And if you have to make a pitch, make sure that your pitch includes the key points. If you feel that some questions are not answered adequately, either rewrite that section of the business plan or state in the plan that you will address that issue in the future. But always seek business advice here, ideally from an incubator mentor, whenever possible, or from your accountant, or from family friends who are involved in business. But make sure you are able to answer questions effectively. So that's the end of the presentation then. We hope it's been helpful and thank you for your attention.